Hello, I'm Caroline and welcome to Sage Care and welcome to this video of going through a thought modification journal. So a thought modification journal is part of a cognitive behavior theory where the belief is that your thoughts impact your emotions, and in turn, your thoughts and emotions impact your actions, behavior, and your attitude. So if you attack your thoughts, essentially what you're doing is you're having more control over your emotions and therefore more control over your actions and your behavior. So, in this thought modification journal, I'm going to be using a couple of examples that I have run into frequently over the years. And so we're going to break those down. And in this, in my thought modification journal, there's two sheets to it. So the first one is your working sheet. And on the reverse side is it explains each row that you go through. So situations are everything outside of us, things that we can't control. So people, places, things that may, I call them external signals or triggers that kind of give us some that are alerting us of something. These are things that we cannot control, but they also can't control me, right? So we can't control them, but they can't control us neither. So these are who, what, where, when places. You're going to look at where was I, who was around me, what was I doing, what were others doing, what, if any, physical sensations arose. So was I feeling hot? Was I feeling cold? Was I trembling? Was I feeling flush, nausea, dizzy? If you notice any of these, you're writing it down. So you're kind of giving a narrative of the situation. And sometimes we've been in a situation where it's been the action has been or the behavior has been reactive, where we don't really remember what our thoughts were at the time. So, what I would suggest in that case is you may even go before the situation took place. You may start at the beginning of your day and kind of narrate a little bit how your day went and doing that piece. And that will help you kind of break down a little bit what you were even feeling at the time. Sorry about that. What you were feeling at the time, or your mood throughout the day, which can also impact what our thoughts and our emotions are when we're in typical situations. So it's a suggestion that I'm giving as well. The second part is we're going to go through thoughts, and with the thoughts, these can be quite automatic at times, and we don't realize just how automatic they are, but also how much control they are. And what impacts our thoughts is our belief system as well. So our thoughts are internal signals. So these are things that we can control. They're your responsibility, they're your choice, and they influence our actions, our behavior, and our attitude. So what we're looking for thoughts is images that came up. Some people are more visual. So what kind of visual came to your mind? What do those thoughts mean to you? What am I responding to? Are you actually responding to that situation, or is it something else a little deeper? What is the trigger or button that you're responding to? So, we'll hear people say, oh, you pushed my button. Well, technically, we don't have any buttons to push, but what it's saying is that there is something within me that situation sent a reaction in me. So it's my responsibility to look at, well, why am I responding to that? What is it about this situation that's making me uncomfortable? Then we're looking at the emotions. Again, it's an internal signal, things that you can control. They're your responsibility. They influence your actions, your behavior, and your attitude. So you're looking at is what emotions do I feel? Where do I feel those emotions? And this is important. Where are you feeling it within your body? And with that, I use this little diagram because I've used it for probably a couple of years now. Because as I like to say, when it comes to emotions and feelings, this wasn't a topic that I was taught growing up. So this is very much, even though I'm in the field of social work, it has been a learning process for me as well. And so with these emotion sensations, what they've done is a study where they've taken these heat sensors of individuals who are feeling these emotions, and this is what comes up. So it's just a tool. You can find it on the internet. They're called emotion sensations body, and it was a research that they did. And if you Google it, you'll come up with these. And it's just like a quick guide if you're struggling with what the emotion may be, but it'll give you kind of an indication of what it is for you. What do those emotions feel like? So what do they feel for you in your body? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it trembling? Do you feel flush, butterflies, nausea, dizzy, numbness, explosive? And rate the intensity of each emotion 1 to 10. So if there's more than one, rate it. And then you're looking at your actions and behaviors. So these can be anything from verbal, nonverbal actions and non-actions. It could be as simple as an eye roll if you're noticing that this is what you're doing. So what actions and or behaviors did I exhibit? Were they verbal? Were they nonverbal? Were they physical? Were they reactive? Were they silent? Were they gestures, facials? Did I withdraw? Then we're going to look at the cognitive distortions. So we're going to look at what the thought was and if it was a cognitive distortion and what type it was. So then we're looking at, am I an all or nothing? Everybody's this way, or this always happens to me. Am I right? Mind reading? Oh, they did this because they think this of me. You don't actually know that, right? So are we labeling? Are we fortune telling? Are we coming to conclusions that are predictive? Are we personalizing it? They didn't wave because they didn't like me. Is it an emotional reasoning? Am I using I should have, or they should have, or they must do, imposing statements, judgment statements? Am I blaming? I reacted this way because you said this. Again, we're responsible for our actions, right? We're responsible for our thoughts and our emotions, which is a combination of all three. So then we're going to look at the evidence and the facts that support our triggered thoughts and that are against our triggered thoughts. So we're going to look at both. We're putting them both on the table. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look at alternative, balanced, and realistic thoughts. So for this, and I'm going to say this often, it's about I'm going to stop. This is where the practice comes in. I stop, I breathe. I put myself in that relaxed, calm state. So I'm not in my reactive brain. I'm in my realistic, logistical brain where I can reason, right? That's where I want to be to make that balanced, realistic thought. What is the most realistic balance perspective for me? What would I say to someone I know who was having those thoughts, who were in that situation? What would that conversation look like? If it was my daughter or my son or my best friend or a family member, how would that conversation look like if they were exhibiting the same thoughts that I'm exhibiting in this situation? Is my reaction in proportion to the situation? What would I do differently that would be more effective? And then what alternative thoughts would have a better outcome for my emotions? So is there a thought, can I change that thought to have a better impact on my emotion? And that's up to you, right? And then the last one, sorry, is the outcomes. So how much do I believe in my triggered thoughts? And being really realistic, how much do you believe in your initial thought? And then going through this, is the intensity still the same? And it might be, and you need to be realistic about that. How much do I believe in the alternative thought? And there's going to be the imbalance, because especially if you're used to thinking of a certain way, The alternative may not necessarily feel realistic to you, but it's sitting better than the triggered one, right? So this is going to be, this is where the work comes in, because it may have to happen a few times with the same type of thoughts that are coming up, especially if it's been a pattern over years and years and years. What is more helpful to me in this situation, and what emotion do I feel now? And again, you're going to rate those emotions. Every single time you're writing an emotion down, you're going to rate it, because this is how you're going to see if there's been any change. Okay. So let's get to work. And the first example I am going to use for this is, let me just turn the page. Saying hi to a friend, and they don't wave back. Okay, I know this, and these are the examples that I'm using have been examples that I've heard throughout the years. This isn't like pulling it out of my hat situation. These are fairly common situations that I've heard. Okay, so we're looking at saying hi to a friend, doesn't wave back. Now, this is a little vague. So what you want to do is go back and say, okay, what's my situation here? So describe what's going on for you. So you're busy doing errands, not paying attention really. You're just focused on doing your thing. You noticed your friend. You waved. They didn't wave back. So you notice that your face is getting warm. And you have a sick feeling in your stomach. So then we're going to go to our thoughts. Let's look at, okay, so we know in the situation, we did the who, what, where, when. You know, it was a friend. You were doing errands, not really paying attention, kind of busy, mulling about. You noticed your friend, you waved, and they didn't wave back, and you noticed some physical sensations. And then we look at, okay, well, what thoughts are coming up? What were the triggered thoughts? She must be upset. Upset with me. What did I do wrong? So the line of thinking that I'm going on right now is we're looking at a people-pleasing kind of scenario, where if you're not getting the reciprocal from an individual, you internalize that, and then you're looking at fixing things. I hope she's not mad at me. I'm embarrassed. And then start to review, analyze all past interactions with friend to see what you did wrong. Wrong quotes here. That's very subjective, right? Okay, so then we would be looking at, so we looked at what thoughts, images came through my mind. What do those thoughts mean to me? What am I responding to? What is the trigger button that I'm responding to? So what we're responding to in this situation is the fact that somebody didn't wave back at you. So it's personalized. You're personalizing this, and that you feel like you need to fix it, right? So there's a people-pleasing fixer kind of vibe going on here, and internalizing that everything that you do needs to be right. So kind of a perfectionist kind of vibe going. the nice person. So then we're looking at the emotions. Internal, again, internal signals that we can control. And these thoughts are going to feed into these emotions, right? So they influence our actions and our behavior. So we're looking at what emotions do I feel? Where do I feel these emotions in my body? And do I notice them? You may not notice them because maybe you've ignored them for so many years. Once you start noticing them, you're going to notice them all the time, and it's going to be annoying as hell. Sorry, but it's true. And then once you start processing them, then you start to notice them decreasing again. It's not gonna feel like these flare up of emotions coming up all the time, but initially you will because you're allowing it to happen and you're noticing them. So it's not that they haven't been there before, they've always been there. It's just that you're allowing the flow. And so they may be coming through like a floodgate. And this is where the learning how to self-regulate really is important, is through this process as well. And remembering that when you're doing this and those emotions come up, to allow yourself to sit with them and feel them and allow the process to go through. And eventually you'll notice that the intensity of those emotions will reduce in similar situations for you. So in this case, we're looking at, well, we're confused, right? A 10 because you don't understand why they're not waving at you. You're worried. What do I need to do to fix it? You're upset because you believe that you've upset somebody, and in return, they're not waving to you. Excuse me. You're panicked, trying to fix the situation. Rejected. So there's some rejection issues coming on here. Again, a 10. And embarrassed. Like some of these emotions, you're going to feel them in different places, but most likely in this kind of situation, you would feel heat in the face, shoulder, back, chest area. And then you'd feel tight in the chest. That's the panicky kind of feeling. I need to fix things that. And then again, sick or knots in stomach. And that again comes with the feeling of panic, anxiety. You'll feel that activation in your stomach where I need to fix something. So then we're looking at the actions and the behaviors, right? What actions and behaviors did I exhibit? Were they verbal? Were they nonverbal? Reactive, silent, facial, withdrawal. In situations like this, what I see often is retreat within. And they retreat, withdraw. I guess they're both the same. Withdraw, within. So internalize. So internalizing feelings and the situation, and just absolutely retreat and overanalyze to try and fix. And we look at the cognitive distortions. Okay, so what kind of thoughts are coming up for me? Are they all or nothing, catastrophic, jumping to conclusions? So in this one, it would be so jumping to conclusions, mind reading, projecting what someone else thinking, right? So that's jumping to conclusion, personalizing, not knowing the situation on maybe that person was just as busy as you were, emotional reasoning. Now we're going to look at the evidence and the facts that support and that are against these unhelpful thoughts. So we're going to look at the ones that support first. So it could be that this person, she ignored me in the past. Right? So it's as real as it gets. Talks about me. Okay. And then against would be she didn't see me, right? Just as busy as I was. And the other one I would ask is, does it matter? A lot of times what has come up in these scenarios is that the individual who isn't waving back technically isn't even really a friend, more of an acquaintance or an associate. And so it's to put it as real as it can be, does it matter if this individual is not waving back at me? Am I going to allow my self-worth? Is that how I'm judging, or is that how I'm evaluating my self-worth by somebody else? Decision to choose or not to choose to wave back at me. So does it matter? How is that going to impact my life? How does that person not waving at me impact my life as a whole? So then we look at, okay, what alternative balance, realistic thought can I have? So in this situation, again, we stop, we take a breath. What is the most balanced, realistic perspective for me? What would I say to somebody in the same situation? You know, what would I tell my daughter or my son? What would I tell my best friend? What would I tell a family member? Is my reaction in proportion to the situation? So is my reaction or my feelings and my thoughts in proportion to this individual's not waving at me? What would I do differently that would be more effective? And what alternative thought would I have? So in this situation, what I put was, if I did something to upset this person, it's her responsibility to let me know. I'm not a mind reader, right? So if I did do something to upset this person, it's their responsibility to let me know and advise me so that we can have that discussion. If the individual is not bringing this forward to me, is it somebody that I want in my life? Is it somebody that I want to be friends with? Or is it my friend? And again, how is that going to impact my life in a whole? My worth is not determined by someone not waving at me. And as I'm doing that, as I actually write that statement, that sits well for me. Like I'm actually feeling like, ooh, yeah, is my worth is not determined by whether or not somebody's going to choose to wave at me or not. Am I going to give them that much control over my feelings and emotions and over my thoughts? It's a way of looking at it, because I control them and I know that. So by saying that, by somebody not doing something, essentially what I'm doing is saying that they're controlling my feelings and my thoughts. And I don't know about you, but that's not something that I'm willing to give up control. So the next one is the outcome. All right, so what did I write here? How much do I believe my triggered thoughts? So we look at the triggered thoughts. How much do I believe in that triggered thought, right? She must be upset with me. If I'm going to be honest, the triggered thought, I'm still at about a 60 or 6 to a 7 on that. Because there's still work to be done for me. So if I'm being honest and the triggered thought that upset me, yeah, it would, in the same situation, the intensity wouldn't be the same. And I would do this again, and I would notice the intensity drop again and again and again until I realized that that person cannot wave at me for the rest of my life and it has zero impact on me, like zero trigger, zero nothing. It's just, it is what it is. But if I'm being honest, at this point, there's still a belief system there that I need to work on. So it's still there. And then I'd be looking at, so my outcome is I'm choosing to say my worth is not determined. I am bound and determined to put not with 2 N's. My worth is not determined by someone not waving at me. I'm choosing that. And then I look at the emotion. And for me, that's content. And I put that at least at an 8.5 for me. And I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied with that. And I'm also, that one is probably a 10. So that's example number 1 on doing the thought modification journal. Hi, and welcome to the second example that I'm going to be giving for my thought modification journal. As you can see, it's already actually completed. I've already did one recording of the second example. However, not being very technical savvy, the shared screen that I was using was actually a different screen. So the recording did not show this part of the work that I did. It was showing something else. So I'm going to go over the thought modification journal for the second example. However, I'm not going to delete everything and then redo it. But I will be highlighting the sections when I'm talking about it as I go through them. So in the second example that I'm using for my thought modification journal, I decided to do things a little bit different for this one. Rather than start off in the situation, which I did in the first one, what I'm going to be doing for this one is I'm starting with the actions and behaviors. So sometimes what happens is when we're in a situation and we act or behave a certain way, and then what happens is we kind of revisit it later because we're like, oh, I'm a bit embarrassed by my behavior or by what took place, but not really understanding the whole process or what actually happened. So we're going to start with the action and behavior and then work our way to what the situation was and work through our thoughts and emotions. So the action and behavior that I decided to use, so I'm just going to highlight here so that you see where I'm working at, is I snapped during a meeting. I'm not your secretary, do it yourself, because I'm the only woman you think I'm going to do all your photocopying, your clerical work, slam the door on your way out of the meeting. So that was the action and the behavior. So what we're going to do is we're going to move into, so I'll take that off. We're moving into this situation now. All right, so we're working on situations right now. So we're looking at all the external signals, triggers, so people, places, things that we can't control that were going on prior to my actions and my behavior, which was snap during a meeting. I'm not your secretary. I'm going to keep that one actually highlighted as yellow. I said, not very tech savvy. There we go. So we write down the situation, what was going on. During a meeting, being asked to make photocopies for the group of men. I'm the only woman in the room. It's a business meeting, mostly older men in their 50s and 60s. So that's the situation. You're having a professional meeting, and you're the only woman in the meeting, and you were asked to do the photocopies for the group of men. and you're running it. So the sensations that you feel are heat in face, pink here. So we're feeling the heat in the face, the body starts to tighten, and the jaw starts to clench. Okay, so there's an indication that something's going on here for you. Now we're going with our thoughts for that. So here we go. Let's try to get organized here. So the thoughts that were going on when that happened. So now we're slowing things down, right? The event already took place, and now we're slowing things down to try to figure out, okay, what were the triggers for me? What was the situation? And how could I have thought differently so that my emotions weren't so reactive and I didn't have such a reaction during that meeting? So the thoughts going in when that happened was, who the fuck do they think they are? I don't work this hard to serve them. Misogynistic pigs. They need to be put in their place. All men are the same. They can do their own photocopying. I'm not good enough. Misogyny. Okay, so another thing that you want to do is also kind of evaluate what the mood was even prior to going into the meeting. Was there any anxiety going on? Were there any guards being put up, any armor, any stress prior to the meeting? All right. So now we look at the emotion part. So the emotion, again, is our internal signals that you can control, that you're responsible for, that influence the actions and the behavior. So in this situation, we looked at, there was anger, okay, and we're rated as a 10. Again, every emotion we're going to rate. So the emotion in this situation, a 10, agitated, an 8, being annoyed, 8 as well, embarrassed, the after effects, 10, shame, 10 as well. And again, you're going to note the sensations that you're feeling within your body. Again, we're making that connection, right? The connection between our thoughts and our emotions and our body as well, because they're all interconnected. So heat in the face, in the stomach, in the chest area. So we already reviewed the behavior because we did that one first. So now we're going to look at the cognitive distortions. What were the distorted thoughts that were happening when the comments were made? Well, we know we did an all or nothing, jumping to conclusions. So the all or nothing, we can put, where do we see that? All men are the same, right? That's an all or nothing statement. So this is an all or nothing statement. All men are the same. Jumping to conclusions. Mind reading. Maybe they just weren't aware because this is the pattern that they've had in every single meeting. Labeling and personalizing it to yourself. So now we're looking at the evidence, the evidence and the facts that support. So we're going to start with the supporting facts that support your triggered thoughts. So one that supports it would be that it's happened to me before in meetings full of men. This is the same pattern that happens. They assume that I do all the clerical work because I'm a woman. Okay, so that may be going into the meeting, maybe having a guard up already. And the ones that are against, the evidence against those triggered thoughts. So we look at, are all men the same? No, they're not. We do know that. And that you can look at your relationships with spouse, child, parents, friends, and see that they're not all the same. Maybe they just assumed because nobody has said anything before. I mentioned that before. Maybe there hasn't been a clarification in my role. Maybe that's something that needs to take place that hasn't been done before. And so the assumption is that if you're doing the meeting, you do the photocopying. So an alternative balance and realistic thought that we can take. So one is, people know I'm a competent worker. So when you're having these thoughts that who do they think they are to ask me to do something so mundane, like photocopying, for instance? It's about putting our ego in check as well. Is this about the fact that they think I'm incompetent in doing my work, and so they're getting me to do something minimal? Um, or is this just something that isn't even in their awareness, right? So when you look at what type of work do you do, people know I'm a competent worker. So it has nothing to do with my competence. I am a competent worker. So that's a balanced and realistic thought. So maybe another alternative, or an alternative thought would be, I will clarify my role during the meeting or at the beginning of the next meeting, so there's no further confusion on what my tasks are and what my role is within this structure, right? So then we look at what the outcomes are. Again, we look at what the triggered thoughts was. The triggered thought was, who do they think they are by asking me to do such a mundane task? You know, my job is much more important than photocopying. We can go on and on and on with the list. So my triggered thoughts, when that happens again, am I going to react the same way? Probably not, because now it's brought to my awareness. I'm bringing it to my awareness and I'm putting it through this process. But when I look at my triggered thoughts, does it mean that it's not going to trigger me again? No, that doesn't mean that. It just means that I'm working on it. So at this point, I would say that I'm probably about 50% good right now. But in the future, it may still trigger me. But when I do this process again, eventually I'm going to notice that the emotional charge sensation is eventually going to dissipate, because I'm going to make the connection that whatever they ask and do has nothing to do with me. And I can choose on how to think about that situation and how it's going to impact my emotions. And then in the end, how it's going to impact my behavior and my actions. So then I look at my new thought, and my new thought about, I'm going to clarify my role so that there's no further confusion. And so then my back isn't up against the wall and I feel defensive. And I feel happy about that. So I'm giving that a 10, where I do feel confident and satisfied with that decision, with that alternative balanced thought, where by doing this, and clarifying things and making things clear, so that there's no confusion between roles and tasks. So I decide that I will clarify my role at the next meeting for no further confusions. So there you go with the second example of the thought modification, a little bit shorter than the first one, because I gave a little bit more explanation. But again, if you have any comments or any questions, please feel free to drop me a line through email, and I can go over that with you. Good luck, give it a try, and I can't wait to see your first hand in. Cheers.